So, the last time that I addressed a crowd this big, how big is this crowd? I was a supervisor in the Postal Service, and they had to listen. So, man, y'all are spread out. So, Joe told me I might have 3 weeks. We're going to go in 2 weeks. Ardith and I are going to Lubbock, Texas for that. That's first week in August, right? Yeah. Anyway, so we're going to be in Lubbock, so I won't get my 3 weeks. Maybe he'll give me a third week if y'all want to hear me. So what I've entitled my talk is Salt and Light. By the way, how many were here last week when the guy from the prison, what was his name? His name was Troy Nielsen from ARM. Nelson. Yep, that's what it says. Troy. Troy Nelson, Prison Outreach International. Before I heard him, my mind was already made up on the reason people were in prison and, why they were being held there, their crimes and stuff like that. And I got to tell you, he really opened my eyes. So, you can teach an old dog new tricks. I was extremely surprised to learn what he had to offer. And so it was, thank you for that, Tom. Thank you very much. Anyway, I want you to know how humbling it is for me to be up here and follow men like Troy, and especially like Joe. He is really a gifted, talented teacher, and we really appreciate you. We're not going to clap for you, but we appreciate you. So, I want to show you something. Next week, I guess, do all of you know I'm the mission chair for the congregation for us? Maybe you don't know that. Yes, I've been the mission chair for quite a while now. We've had some wonderful chairs before me. I don't see any of them in here right now. But anyway, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about missions this week. But next week, I want to talk about these scriptures, particularly Romans 13, 1 through 5. And that's the scripture that talks about obeying our government. So the question's going to be next week, are we under unlimited submission to the government? Are there conditions that we need to talk about? So we'll discuss that next week, but I want to let you know. Anyway, this is written. I had already prepared most of next week's lesson, or tried to anyway, and I already had a lot of these ideas written down. So I went to an event with Dan Fisher. How many of you have heard of Dan Fisher? Would you raise your hands? Not a lot. He was a Baptist preacher over here at Trinity Baptist, and he got into politics, and then he got exorcised. Is that the word? No, he got kicked out of Trinity and started another one up here at Liberty. And so he has this presentation called the Black Robe Regiment that is really, really good. You can get it on DVD. But as it would happen, I was to one of his events and picked this book up that he had just written, which is exactly what I want to talk about next week. He's going to be at a JBS meeting tonight at 5. If any of you want to know where and what he's going to talk about and stuff like that, well, just let me know. So anyway, I want to get that out of the way. I see why you have your coffee up here. Your mouth gets dry. Anyway, so salt and light. That's what I'm going to be talking about. We're inspired and perplexed and horrified by stories that we've learned all over our lifetimes of people who change lives, they change cultures, they change governments, they change nations. People like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Luther Burbank, Robert E. Lee, Custer, Geronimo, Teddy Roosevelt, Marie Curie. You remember her? She was the X-ray lady. Edison, Eleanor Roosevelt. How about FDR, JFK, MLK, LBJ? What about John Wayne, Rush Limbaugh? Rush Limbaugh. How many of you have heard of Rush Limbaugh? All right. I'm in good company. Well, what about these people? Lenin, Stalin, Hitler. How about Manson or Gacy? What about modern day men that we're aware of right now, like Gates, Zuckerberg, Bezos? How about Fauci? Did these people influence us for good or for evil? Were they, yes, evil? I know some of them influenced others for Christ, but I don't know, we can't say much about the others. Anyway, my question for us is, can we individually influence others for Christ? Can we influence their behavior? So, I've been a member of this congregation since 1972. I was, Vernon Williams, a preacher over at Cornwell Drive, taught us and baptized me on the Columbus Day weekend of that year. Anyway, another thing, over these years, how old would I have been? I would have been 24 then when I was baptized. So over these years, I've studied the Bible, heard a lot of really great Bible teachers, and I've come to believe that God's Word is the absolute authority over every aspect of our lives, not just Sundays or Wednesdays, but every single thing that we do. Even the books of Song of Solomon and Esther, these two books, I don't think I've ever found God's name mentioned in them. Maybe some of you have, but I never have. But they give us inspiration and they give us instruction, don't they? In fact, that's what the Old Testament is all about, isn't it? It's for instruction for us. So, I'm going to make a statement you may or may not agree with. I believe that the whole of the Bible is true, absolutely every word, or none of it is. So that's the way we are to live our lives, or try to anyway. We're all trying. Hebrews 10:24 says, "Let us consider one another to provoke unto love and good works." The NIV says, "Spur one another on towards love and good works." Proverbs 27:17 says, "As the iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another." That's exactly what this class tries to accomplish when our teachers talk to us. So, make sure I have enough time here. My Christian exposure was very brief in life. In fact, probably, I got to ask this question. I got to see a show of hands. How many of you were born into a family that were already Church of Christ people? Well, it's about what? Almost half? Well, my wife and I, we weren't either one born into the family with the Church of Christ. She actually was a Methodist, and I was a heathen. So, yeah, I was. So my early Christian exposure was in Rogers, Arkansas. It's about 2 years before I was at the end of my first grade. I don't think we made it to first grade. I think we moved right after that. But Granddad and Grandma Sheaffer, they lived in the next farm up from us on a dirt road, and they were west from it. I'm pretty sure, I was a kid, I'm pretty sure it was west of us. Because the sun would rise over there and it would set over there. So I could go through the cornfield. You'd go through those rows, and of course you're a kid this high and the corn's this high, and it was really scary. So I could go from our place to their place through the cornfield. Like I say, it was really scary. But it was better than going on the road because it was a dirt road. And every time in the summertime especially, you're walking down that dirt road and you get dusted. Because here comes a car or a truck or a tractor, and you get dusted. And besides, it's 15 degrees hotter on the road than it is in the cornfield. Anyway, my grandma Sheaffer, she tried desperately to evangelize our family. She would drag us kids. There were only 3 of us at the time, siblings. And she would take us to church with her. And I remember we'd go, of course, there, it was a big, I think it was the First Baptist of Rogers. And so, you know, it was a really, really nice building. We would go in, all the guys would be in suits and these short ties, short ties. And everybody had a hat. And when they go in the building, they take off that hat. All the ladies had these hats on or a shawl or something, and they all had pretty dresses on. Well, the peculiar thing about it was, you know, that's the only time I ever saw my grandpa and grandma dressed up, because the rest of the time he was wearing coveralls. And she was wearing, you know, a dress made out of those flour sacks, cornmeal sacks, whatever, and that she had made, and of course a homemade apron. So you didn't wear those Sunday go-to-meeting clothes unless you were going to a wedding or a funeral or to a really, well, church, of course, or a really, really important business meeting. So that's the kind of way it was. Anyway, my next real, I guess, exposure to Christianity, we lived in Oklahoma City. I was about in the 5th grade, and they had this bus ministry, and the bus would come by, and so we'd go out there and ride the bus, but we didn't do it very often. So they took us to Exchange Avenue Baptist Church, and of course you went to Bible class. They called it Sunday school, but you go to Sunday school, and then they would pack you into pews after that and preach to you, and then get you home. And I remember Mom, she says, "Well, what did you guys learn? What did you learn about Jesus today?" And nobody spoke up, and I'm the oldest. And I said, "Well, you know, they didn't say a word about Jesus. They just talked about this guy named Paul." So that was pretty much my Christian exposure before I met Vernon and before I was converted and baptized. So anyway, Matthew 15, 13 through 16, if you'd like to turn there. Matthew 5, verses 13 through 16. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and praise your Father which is heaven. You know, the kids sing "This Little Light of Mine," right? Under a bushel basket? No. So, I hope you will allow me to, well, you're here, so I guess you'll allow me. I've got some stories that I want to tell you. These are some of my experiences, my life experiences. Most of them don't go back too far. Wouldn't you agree that most of the time when you talk to people, they want to tell you their story, and you want to tell them your story? Is that not right? Most of the course guys, we talk about what is it that you do, isn't it? What do you do? What do you do? Anyway, so hopefully, after you hear these little short stories, we'll all be praising God and glorifying Him because you heard them. So, our second oldest son, Patrick, was first introduced to Adventures in Missions by Rex Boyles. As Pat tells the story, Artie and I made him take his 3 siblings to this youth rally in Oklahoma City. That's probably true. I don't know. I can't remember. She can't either. So anyway, we always thought that his exposure to AIM, Adventures in Missions, came through our associate minister, whose name was Richard Lewis Gary. Is that right? Look at me, honey. Is that right? Yeah, okay. Is that right, Joe? Richard Lewis Gary? Anyway, he was our associate minister. I'm pretty certain that he encouraged Pat to go. Anyway, so Pat says, though, it was Rex Boyles that really inspired him to become part of AIM. So he decided to go in 1988. They went. I mean, he went. And after about 9 months of intensive Bible training, and it is very intense, he went to Portugal with his team, and about a year or so later, he met Melissa, who is his wife now. In fact, he stayed another year in Portugal. He volunteered to go back and be there another year. Of course, we find out later it's because she was there. So anyway, yeah. So they have been, all of their married lives, they have worked with Sunset and other churches. So this is quite a while. They were missionaries to Guadalajara, Mexico, with 4 other families, and they committed to 5 years. They stayed there 5 years, and they were establishing a congregation there. In fact, their second son, one of our grandsons, of course, was born in Mexico. So Pat has served as AIM's assistant director coordinator now for over 20 years. They have, how many of y'all are familiar with AIM? Raise your hands. AIM, Adventures and Missions, comes out of Lubbock, part of Sunset. Not very many. Well, they normally have a class of about 20 to 40 college-age kids that come and receive this intensive training to learn to be missionaries. And then during this process of school and team building and all this kind of stuff that they're learning, they are equipped to evangelize, and they are then formed into teams and assigned to go to different places. In fact, got this. Oh, sorry. This is a magazine called Lifeline, and it's an SIBI, Sunset International Bible Institute. It's a publication, comes out once a quarter. Artie and I get it because we're pretty heavily involved with Sunset. I mean, you know, how many, 1988? So I don't know, you can't see it, especially if you're sitting way out over here. You know, that's the neat thing about it. When I was a supervisor, I could control people, kind of, and get them all in one place where I could see their eyes all at once. So anyway, this Santa Claus looking fella is our son Pat. Later you come down here and see it if you want to. This is our grandson Titus. He's in Mexico City this year, and he's also their youngest. This is our daughter-in-law Melissa. If you'll recall, in February, we had 4 kids here from AIM, and they were on their thing called Challenge Week. Anyway, we've had it, what, 4 years? 4 years, 5 years now, we've had a team and they come and they work with the youth, and they work with Newberry. And anyway, so their pictures are in here also. This is Ben, and this is Abigail. She is Corey Burns' daughter. And then, of course, that was Titus. And then the blue shirt right here, checkered shirt, that was the girl that was also with them, Kelly. So they have, AIM has been, last year, no, it was this year. This year they celebrated their 50th anniversary. Artie and I were there, and we actually got to meet people. This is so hard to believe. We actually got to meet people who were almost as old as us, who were in that first class of Aimers. So anyway, of course, your money, this congregation supports Corey and Pat in their efforts. So, if you would, turn to Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 through 16. If you want to read along with me, I'm just going to paraphrase this. I'm going to get a drink first. By the way, next week, I'm going to have a whole bunch of questions and answers. Okay? Matthew 20, verses 1 through 16. You'll recognize this. This is a parable that Jesus told. A certain landowner went out early in the morning to hire men to work in his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for a whole day's work. These workers went into the fields, and then about the third hour, he went back to the marketplace again, found some more guys, and he negotiated their wage and sent them to the fields. Then about the sixth hour, he did the very same thing, hired some more. And apparently his must have a big vineyard, because he goes back at the ninth hour and hires some more. Well, then the day is over, and they're lining up to get paid, right? All of you are familiar, especially if you teach children, you have taught this. Artie and I taught 5th and 6th grade for about 30 years here. Anyway, so they're lining up and they're going to get paid. So the landowner, he pays ones that came at the 11th hour the denarius. Well, if you're standing there, I'm standing there, I'm thinking, this is looking pretty good. They got a denarius. That means I might get 3 or 4 or 5, right? No. What happened? They all got paid the same. I got to tell you, I had a really hard time with this story for a long, long time in my life. But then, I had this experience. I served as postmaster in Crescent from 1991 to 1995. And it's up the highway, that's north, right? It's up the highway north on 74, about 40 minutes, I guess, from here. Anyway, postmasters in that size of office, we had to do everything. We sort mail, we wait on the window, selling stamps and packages. Besides supervising, you have all that as well. And all these other, postal duties. Almost everybody in town had a post office box. The only ones that didn't have a post office box were the ones who lived on the direct route out of town. Well, I had 2 rural routes, pretty good sized rural routes. And of course, they went in opposite directions. So if you lived on their way out of town, you got your mail at your box. Otherwise, you had to come in the post office and pick up your mail. That's just the way small towns were. So one of the most pleasing aspects of that work was that I got to wait on my customers because my clerks, I had a short day clerk staff. So I'd have them in for early in the morning sorting mail, and then when I went, sometimes if I were gone, they would be there. But I didn't have a very big clerk budget. So anyway, I was there a lot of times by myself. So the greatest thing about is getting to know the people, waiting on the people, finding out about their lives. Well, I had these 2 customers who were members of the Lord's Church up in Crescent. So I'm going to tell you about 2 of them. Mr. Stafford was an older lady. She was tall and she was thin. She's a very stately lady. I never could stand up that straight. I mean, but she was really quiet. She was pleasant all the time. She just didn't talk much. Well, we had a postal increase, and foreign postage went up. Well, she was coming in because she was mailing World Bible School correspondence courses out to Africa and other places. Well, all of a sudden, with that postage increase, she couldn't do it anymore because it was too expensive not only for her and the church to mail these out, it was also expensive for the students in those foreign countries to mail it back. So she didn't stop it, though. She found another way. Also was this man who came in usually once or twice a week. He was out of town a lot. And he'd pick up his box mail, and as time permitted, he would come in and we would visit. The neat thing about this guy was that he was involved in prison ministry all over Oklahoma, Texas, and I think Kansas. Yeah, Kansas. And he did it full time. His name was Curtis Booth, and he was a wonderful guy. The thing of it is, what really made us hit it off is that Joe and, I got a list here, Joe and Andy Dean and Travis Millholland, Mike McDonald, Walt McGaw, Albert Myers, all of us, and there were others too, but I can't remember them all. We went out to El Reno Federal Penitentiary and tried to teach those people. And I think we had baptisms out there even, so it was really neat. So I got to talk with him, and he'd always come in excited. He would talk about these different prisoners that he's working with. Anyway, it's hard to believe. One of these prisoners that he was particularly working on at this time was a Jewish rabbi that had turned Christian. So, anyway, so he was a unique individual. That's probably what people say about me. I'm a unique individual. That's what you say about food that you're not real fond of, right? It's unique. Anyway, no, I was really fond of this guy. He was about 6 feet tall, and he was almost as big around as he was tall. And he had this flaming red hair. And it was getting darker as he was getting older. I'm pretty sure when he was a kid, it was a carrot top. You know what I mean? Well, anyway, of course, my wife was redheaded. I love redheads. My two favorite aunts were redheads. Anyway, so he and I just got along wonderfully. And it was like, and it was always that way. I mean, it was just sticking up, all over. And he had this big white tufts of hair sticking out like that, and it was sticking out like that. Anyways, how many of you ever saw the animated movie, The Incredibles? Y'all don't watch kid stuff, do you? Listen, when you got grandkids, you watch kid stuff. So, and it's a funny movie. But anyway, the reason I brought that up is because the first time I saw that movie, the villain in there, and Kurt's not a villain, he's a wonderful guy, but the villain in that movie had hair just like Kurt. It was absolutely. Anyway, what really makes him unique is he was converted in prison to Christ. He had already served several stints. In the last stint, somebody came in there, somebody converted him. And so he always was thankful for that person that came in, took the time to come in, and it can be dangerous, actually, to do that. Anyway, he had these piercing blue eyes, and when he would look at you, sometimes it was scary. But then when he'd start talking about Jesus, he'd start talking about Christ, and he would talk about these prisoners who needed to hear the word, his eyes just get real soft. Have you ever seen people like that? Yeah, all of us have, haven't we? Anyway, he was really grateful for the people that shared the gospel with him. So, probably by now, you may have guessed that Mrs. Stafford and Kurt, they're from the same congregation. They teamed up. She couldn't afford to send the lessons to Africa anymore, the WBS lessons. And so Kurt is providing her names of all these jail people, right? All these prison people. I mean, he went into McAllister, he went into county jails, he went into city jails, all over. And what's really interesting is that the Crescent Church actually supported this prison ministry. He did this full time. Congregation was only about 40 people. At that time, I don't know what it is now. One of our members, it'll come to me. Anyway, I'll tell you. Back to my story. So one day, Kurt comes in to my office, and he's the most excited and pumped up I'd ever seen him. And he says, and of course, I want to hear what's going on. It wasn't a particularly busy day in the post office that day. I'm trapped there anyway, right? I'm not going anywhere. So I'm listening to him, and he says, he comes in, he wants me to look up the zip code for him, for this letter he was mailing off back east. And he says, did you see that man and his father on TV last night? I got no clue who he's talking about. So he tells me the name. And so I'm looking up the zip code. I'm not really kind of paying, not paying a whole lot of attention. Because sometimes, like me, I get to rattling on, and so you kind of lose interest. But anyway, so he got the zip code. As he was leaving, he tells me, it was something to the effect of, would you please pray for this man and his father? He said he is in need of Christ more than anybody I ever met. You got to remember, he saw some pretty dangerous characters while he was going all around the jail ministry. Anyway, this is going to be hard to believe. When I heard it, because he told me, and I wrote this stuff down sometimes as he would tell me. Kurt and the preacher there in Crescent at the time did farming on the side. Most of these small towns, they can't afford to pay a preacher full time, and so they usually have to have another business. So he was a farmer as well. Well, Kurt and this farmer preacher, they were responsible for 314 prison souls to be converted to Christ and baptized in this time period. It was from 1990 until the first quarter of 94. So how many years is that? 3? Is that right? Is that math right? 3? Anyway, 314. And of these 314, Kurt bragged, he actually bragged to me about it, 3 of them were actually Satan worshipers. An interesting thing. A wonderful friend of ours sent me a text yesterday that said that Fox News was going to support Satan worshipers, Satan temple souls. They were going to match all the donations that came in for these Satan worshipers, up to, I think it was 100,000. How much? 100,000? Oh, only 1,000. Oh, per donation. So that could be, this is Fox News. You remember, 15 years ago? That's where you turned if you wanted conservative news. No. That is right. Thank you for bringing that up. That is not the program. That is the owner, the corporation. This is not the people that you see when you turn on the Fox News. So the world is changing extremely fast. Yes? I didn't say that. No, this was strictly the upper management of Fox News. Now, and of course, the thing of it is, you're never sure about things that you hear, whether they're true or not, right? Yes. Oh, he did? Yes. So it's true? Yes. Well, normally, this was a Newsmax broadcast. And typically, especially in today's world where you got people that love to sue and people who love to get, settlements, you have to be careful what you say. You got to be really careful, or else you got to have a whole lot of money. So anyway, back to my story. So many days later, Kirk comes back into the office and is really excited, and he brings these 2 letters for me to read. One of them was from that Jewish rabbi. And then the other, I'm going to read to you. It's dated April the 1st, 1994. We end at quarter till, right? 10 till. Oh, hey, that's all right. You got to suffer for me a little bit longer. So, Let me read this letter. This is a copy of a copy, by the way. I kept the original at home. Dear Mr. Booth, hello, how are you today? Fine, I hope. It's typewritten, which is really good. Thank you very much for sending me the WBS introductory lesson and the Bible. That was very kind of you. I mailed the completed lessons to Mrs. Stafford. There we go. So she should have it by now. Also, let me get my drink. Man, this is... Okay. Also, about a week after I received your package, Mrs. Mott, and he's got this as in quotes, from Arlington, Virginia, sent me the WBS, this is World Bible School correspondence course, and the advanced course booklets. I filled out both of them and mailed them off to her to be graded. So she'd already mailed the thing back to Mrs. Stafford. Now this, how many of you participated in WBS? Tom and Donna did. Ken? Is Daryl in here? Oh, okay. So, well, a lot of people. So you're very familiar with it. Anyway, he says, so I filled out both of them and mailed them off to her to be graded. So I've now taken the complete course, but I still have one problem. This prison does not have a baptismal tank. And Mr. Burkham, the prison chaplain, says he is not sure if he can find someone to bring a tank in and baptize me. This has me very concerned. Would you be willing, and he's got a punctuation mark after that, what do you call it? Exclamation point. Would you be willing to find someone to baptize me? I've taken all the other steps now, and this part's underlined. I need and want to be baptized. Well, I hope this letter finds you all well and in good health. God bless you. Sincerely, Jeff Dahmer. So now you know. It's true. Jeffrey Dahmer was taught about the Lord. He was taught the truth as we see it, as we know the Bible tells us the truth. He was baptized. He gave his life to Christ. I guess you could say he's one of these 11th hour people. WBS. So, the elder, I want to tell you about one more person. This guy's a local hero here. His name is Lloyd Stevens. Of course, he was one of our elders here for a while. He was the chair of the mission committee for a while. I served under him. Wonderful guy. He had a love for the African people like you just cannot believe. I think at the height of WBS here in this congregation, we had, 20 people? Where is Daryl today? Usually he's sitting right there. Oh, he's back there. Daryl, how many workers, Tom, you guys, any of you that worked before, how many workers did we have at the very height when we had that we had this room that was right there, and it had a bunch of computers in there and file cabinets and tables and do you remember, does anybody remember about how many at the height of that program? 20 to 25 people. Lloyd bragged that there was well over 2,000, maybe 3,000 people that were baptized just because of these 20, 25 people that were here sending lessons to Africa. That's wonderful, isn't it? That's wonderful. So, anyway, he's a hero because he absolutely had a love for them that just I mean, you could just see it in his face. You could see it in his face. So he was very dedicated. Anyway, when COVID hit, we'd already dwindled down in numbers as it was. Fewer and fewer people were participating in WBS here. and the number of workers was dwindling down. But when COVID happened, it killed it all, because the foreign countries were no longer exchanging mail with other countries. They were so afraid of that virus being on paper. And by the way, viruses don't last long on paper, so we all know that. But anyway, they were so afraid of that virus that they would not let mail come in or go out of their countries for about a year. I mean, it was pretty bad. So here's my plea for the congregation. Because I'm missions chair, some of the elders have come to me and asked, can we resurrect this WBS program again? So it's up to you in the hearing of my voice, because nobody else is hearing me. So can we get this started again? It's going to be harder. We have smaller space. But I know if there's enough interest that the elders will provide. Well, actually, God provides. God provides, and the elders and the rest of us are just His instruments. That's what we are. We sing this song that we are His hands and His eyes and His feet, talking about Jesus. What's the name of that song? No one remembers. Can't remember the name of that song. Anyway, those are kind of the words in the lyrics, that we are His hands, His feet, His voice. Nobody else. He's not going to speak to people directly. I can't find it in the Word where He's talking to people today directly. If people learn about Jesus, it's only going to be through us. It's only going to be through our children, through our grandchildren. So, also, one more thing. I got a few more minutes. 5. Thank you, Tom. We also need prayers for Rick Knight. He's, right now, I think he's the only prison ministry worker we have. Is that right? Anybody know? I think he's the only one. He goes into the county jail. And he was, after COVID, they cut him off completely, and he couldn't get in. In fact, they cut off every religious worker coming in because they were so terrified from the virus also. We should never, ever, this is just me speaking, we should never, ever let anyone, the government, anyone, terrify us as much as what happened with the COVID. After all, aren't we the faithful? Aren't we the ones who are supposed to rely on Christ? You know, in the Bible, it says it's 366 times the idea is given by the inspired writers not to be afraid, not to be anxious, not to be terrified, because God is with us. So I was unfaithful because I was watching TV every morning with my coffee, sitting there eating breakfast and writing down the numbers, and they were getting higher and higher all the time. How many of us were doing that? That's crazy stuff. That's crazy stuff. Because God's in control. We have to remember that. But, on the other hand, we are His voice. We are His eyes. We are His hands. We are His feet. It's up to us. It's up to us. So, Rick cannot get Bibles into the county jail. He asked the authorities, I need to bring Bibles in. How can we have a Bible study if they don't have a Bible and I'm reading to them? They can't see for themselves. They need to see for themselves. He also had difficulty getting them to try to tell him, you know, how do we get Bibles to these inmates? The last time I talked to him was it last week? I think it was last week, last Sunday. He has a lady right now that wants and needs, underline, to be baptized. Can't get a baptistry in there, can't do anything. So, I'm soliciting your prayers for him and his work. And also, any ideas that you might have, and if any of y'all are lawyers, about how to get him in there. Right now, there is a congregation that goes in. It's called the Bridge. I don't know if it's, of course, it's another denomination. But what I don't know if they're Baptist or whatever, that doesn't matter. What matters is that they're getting more opportunity to preach and teach than we are. I think that's a legal precedent, isn't it? Shouldn't we have equal rights? So anyway, Rick needs help on that. We need help on trying to figure out how that's going to happen. Mostly, please put in your prayer list every day, every time you pray about, yes, Bob?
What prison?
County jail. Not in Oklahoma City, but over in El Reno. Right. He goes there every Saturday. Used to, we would go to the prison at Union City and bring those guys back. And that was a really good work, but then one up and got away. Actually, he walked away, and so they cut us down. Yes, go ahead.
I'm assuming that they have bathing facilities for the prisoners.
Probably showers. Showers. But I was telling her, y'all didn't hear her. She said when she was going to the federal penitentiary, they brought a horse trough in there to baptize. Tom?
You know that ARM, Troy Nelson, that group, has portable baptistry available. I think Rick said that they had gotten.
Okay.
It folds out like an army cot or something.
Yeah. We bought one of those. Tom said that ARM says they have portable baptistries that they take around. This congregation actually bought one for the El Reno Federal Penitentiary. We baptized quite a few. Yeah.